Khagam by Satyajit Ray, Part 1. We were having dinner by the light of a Petromax lamp. I had just helped myself to some curried egg when Lakshman, the cook and caretaker of the rest house, said, "Aren't you going to pay a visit to Imli Baba?" I had to tell him that since we were not familiar with the name of Imli Baba, the question of paying him a visit hadn't arisen. Lakshman said that the driver of the forest department jeep, which had been engaged for our sightseeing, would take us to the Baba if we told him. Baba's hut was in the forest and the surroundings were picturesque. As a holy man, he was apparently held in very high regard. Important people from all over India came to him to pay their respects and seek his blessings. What really aroused my curiosity was the information that the Baba kept a king cobra as a pet which lived in a hole near his hut and came to him every evening to drink goat's milk. Dhurjati Babu's comment on this was that the country was being overrun by fake holy men. The more scientific knowledge was spreading in the West, he said, the more our people were heading towards superstition. It's a hopeless situation. It puts my back up just to think of it. As he finished talking, he picked up the fly swatter and brought it down with unerring aim on a mosquito which had settled on the dining table. Dhurjati Babu was a short, pale-looking man in his late 40s, with sharp features and grey eyes. We had met in the rest house in Bharatpur. I was there on my way to Agra, from where I was going to my elder brother in Jaipur, with whom I had planned to spend a fortnight's holiday. Both the tourist bungalow and the circuit house being full, I had to fall back on the forest rest house. Not that I regretted it. Living in the heart of the forest offers a special kind of thrill along with quiet comfort. Dhurjati Babu had preceded me by a day. We had shared the forest department jeep for our sightseeing. The previous day we had been to Deeg, 22 miles to the east from here, to see the fortress and the palace. That morning we saw the fortress in Bharatpur, and in the afternoon we saw the bird sanctuary at Keoladev, which was something very special. It was a 7-mile stretch of marshland, dotted with tiny islands where strange birds from far corners of the globe came and made their homes. I was absorbed in watching the birds, but Dhurjati Babu grumbled and made vain efforts to wave away the tiny insects buzzing around us. These unkies have a tendency to settle on your face, but they are so small that most people can ignore them. Not Dhurjati Babu. By 8:30 we had finished dinner and were sitting on cane chairs on the terrace and admiring the beauty of the forest in moonlight. "The holy man and the servant mentioned," I remarked. "What about going and taking a look at him?" Flicking his cigarette towards a eucalyptus tree, Dhurjati Babu said, "King cobras can never be tamed. I know a lot about snakes. I spent my boyhood in Jalpaiguri and killed many snakes with my own hands. The king cobra is the deadliest, most vicious snake there is. The story of the holy man feeding it goat's milk should be taken with a pinch of salt." I said, "We are going to see the fortress at Bayan tomorrow morning. In the afternoon we have nothing to do." "I take it you have a lot of faith in holy men." I could see the question was a barbed one. However, I answered calmly, "The question of faith doesn't arise because I have never had anything to do with holy men. But I can't deny that I am a bit curious about this one. I too was curious at one time, but after an experience I had with one..." It turned out that Dhurjati Babu suffered from high blood pressure. An uncle of his had persuaded him to try a medicine prescribed by a holy man. Dhurjati Babu had done so and as a result had suffered intense stomach pains. This had caused his blood pressure to shoot up even more. Ever since he had looked upon 90% of India's holy men as fakes. I found this allergy quite amusing and just to provoke him said, "You said it wasn't possible to tame king cobras. I'm sure ordinary people like us couldn't do it, but I've heard of sadhus up in the Himalayas living in caves with tigers. You may have heard about it, but have you seen it with your own eyes? I had to admit that I hadn't. You never will, said Dhurjati Babu. This is the land of tall stories. You'll hear of strange happenings all the time, but never see one yourself. Look at our Ramayana and Mahabharata. It is said they are history, but actually they are no more than a bundle of nonsense. The 10-headed Ravana, the monkey god Hanuman with a flame at the end of his tail setting fire to a whole city, Bhima's appetite, Ghatotkacha, Hidimba, the flying chariot Pushpak, Kumbhakarna. Can you imagine anything more absurd than these? And the epics are full of fake holy men as well. That's where it all started. Yet everyone, even the educated, swallows these stories. Despite Dhurjati Babu's reservations, the following day we lunched in the rest house after visiting the fortress at Bayan, and after a couple of hours' rest reached the holy man's hermitage a little after 4. Dhurjati Babu didn't object to the trip. Perhaps he too was a little curious about the Baba. The hermitage was in a clearing in the forest below a huge tamarind tree, which is why he was called Imli Baba by the local people, Imli being the Hindi word for tamarind. His real name was not known. In a hut made of date palm leaves, the Baba sat on a bearskin with a young disciple by his side. It was impossible to guess the Baba's age. There was still an hour or so until sunset, but the dense covering of foliage made the place quite dark. A fire burned before the Baba, who had a ganja pipe in his hand. We could see by the light of the fire a clothesline stretched across the wall of the hut, from which hung a towel, a loincloth, and about a dozen sloughed off snake skins. Dhurjati Babu whispered in my ear, "Let's not beat about the bush. Ask him about the snake's feeding time." "So you want to see Balkishan?" asked the Baba, reading our minds and smiling from behind his pipe. The driver of the jeep, Din Dayal, had told us a little while ago that the snake was called Balkishan. We told Baba that we had heard of his pet snake and were most anxious to see it drink milk. Was there any likelihood of our wish being fulfilled? Imli Baba shook his head sadly. He said that as a rule Balkishan came every day in the evening in answer to Baba's call, and had come even 2 days ago. But since the day before he had not been feeling well. "Today is the day of the full moon," said the Baba, "so he will not come. But he will surely come again tomorrow evening." That snakes too could feel indisposed was news to me. And yet why not? After all, it was a tame snake. Weren't there hospitals for dogs, horses and cows? The Baba's disciple gave us another piece of news. Red ants had got into the snake's hole while it lay ill and had been pestering it. Baba had exterminated them all with a curse. Dhurjati Babu threw a sidelong glance at me at this point. I turned my eyes towards Baba. With his saffron robe, his long matted hair, his iron earrings, rudraksha necklaces, and copper amulets, there was nothing to distinguish him from a host of other holy men. And yet, in the dim light of dusk, I couldn't take my eyes away from the man. Seeing us standing, the disciple produced a pair of reed mats and spread them on the floor in front of the Baba. But what was the point of sitting down when there was no hope of seeing the pet snake? A delay would mean driving through the forest in the dark, and we knew there were wild animals about. We had seen herds of deer while coming. So we decided to leave. We bowed to the Baba, who responded by nodding without taking the pipe away from his mouth. Then we set off for the jeep parked about 200 yards away on the road. Only a little while ago the place had been alive with the calls of birds coming home to roost. Now all was quiet. We had gone a few steps when Dhurjati Babu suddenly said, "We could at least have asked to see the hole where the snake lives." I said, "For that we don't have to ask the Baba. Our driver Din Dayal said he had seen the hole." That's right. We fetched Din Dayal from the car and he showed us the way. Instead of going towards the hut, we took a narrow path by an almond tree and arrived at a bush. The stone rubble which surrounded the bush suggested that there had been some sort of an edifice here in the past. Din Dayal said the hole was right behind the bush. It was barely visible in the failing light, so Dhurjati Babu produced a small electric torch from his pocket. As the light from it hit the bush, we saw the hole. But what about the snake? Was it likely to crawl out just to show its face to a couple of curious visitors? To be quite honest, while I was ready to watch it being fayed by the Baba, I had no wish to see it coming out of the hole now. But my companion seemed consumed with curiosity. When the beam from the torch had no effect, he started to pelt the bush with clods of dirt. I felt this was taking things too far and said, "What's the matter? You seem determined to drag the snake out and you didn't even believe in its existence at first." Dhurjati Babu now picked up a large clod and said, "I still don't. If this one doesn't drag him out, I'll know that a cock and bull story about the Baba has been spread. The more such false notions are destroyed, the better." The clod landed with a thud on the bush and destroyed a part of the thorny cluster. Dhurjati Babu had his torch trained on the hole. For a few seconds there was silence, but for a lone cricket which had just started to chirp. Now there was another sound added to it, a dry, soft whistle of indeterminate pitch. Then there was a rustle of leaves, and the light of the torch revealed something black and shiny, slowly slipping out of the hole. The leaves of the bush stirred, and the next moment, through a parting in them, emerged the head of a snake.